Peace and blessings, everyone. Peace and blessings. I hope that you all are able to hear me. This is Tamara T. Bush coming to you live with some additional education on consumer laws. We're going to go over a couple of things this evening so that I can continue to provide clarity for you. Let me just do a sound check really fast. Because I want to make sure that you all can hear me, because I think I had a bit of an issue yesterday with my audio. So I will have to go back probably to hear me. All right, perfect. So it looks as if I'm good. I'm so sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure that you all hear me. All right, so you heard a little bit of an echo there. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So again, if you all do not know me, my name is Tamara T. Bush. If you are new to me, I am not an attorney, nor am I providing legal advice. I am coming on and doing these videos so that I can help to provide clarity to those who need it in terms of consumer law, so that we can ensure that we are not being violated and we learn how to properly assert ourselves. So it's a Friday evening. I know you all are ready to unwind. But I just wanted to come with a quick lesson to leave you with something as you're going into the weekend, right? Okay, so we talked about a lot of things over the past 8 days, right? We talked about the Fair Credit Reporting Act. We gave some definitions in that subsection of Title 15, 1681. We also spoke about the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, which is 15 USC 6802, and that talks about how companies have to respect your right to privacy. We also spoke about the FDCPA, which is Title 15, 1692, right? And that talks about how companies or debt collectors can communicate with you and what your rights are under the law. So tonight, I want to go ahead and focus on who holds the liability and what does that mean? So when we are trying to enforce our consumer rights, we have to be very clear on how we define ourselves under the law and how we define those companies that we're going up against. And so I wanted to speak about this because I want to, provide clarity, because there's some misinformation out there in terms of how we define ourselves as the consumer and the original creditor. So we're going to go through the FCRA. We're going to look and see who's liable under the FCRA. We're going to go and see who's liable under the FDCPA, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. And then we're also going to look and see who the law says is liable under truth in lending, because there is a huge difference in who is liable under these subsections. And so we want to ensure that as a consumer, that we are not putting the liability on ourselves where it should not be placed by improperly defining ourselves when we are engaged in our administrative remedy. All right, so let's get into it. So the first law that you see on the screen, this is actually truth in lending. Truth in lending starts at USC, 15 USC 1601, and it goes all the way down to 1667. And so when you're looking at the different laws, depending on what law you're reading is going to define the same word a different way. And there's a reason for that. Okay, so the general provisions of truth in lending, right? So let's look at the definitions to see how it defines a creditor. Refers only to a person who both regularly extends, right? So they're regularly extending credit, and they are collecting money from transactions on the face of the indebtedness. Okay, hold on one second. Let me go back to, this is actually what I want to talk. We're talking about liability. We are talking about, okay, criminal liability for willful and knowing violation. What I'm looking for. I think it's in this one. This is, okay. Yes, this is the one. Okay, so this is the FDCPA. My apologies. I was looking at Truth in Lending first. Okay, so the FDCPA, the civil liability section of the FDCPA is speaking specifically about a debt collector, right? They don't say anything about a creditor, nor do they say anything about a consumer. Under 15 USC 1692K, the civil liability section is holding the debt collector liable under the subsection, right? So we know, of course, that we're never going to define ourselves as the debt collector. That's sort of a given, right? But I wanted to point this out to you because this liability section is properly defining who the liable party is. And so if you're going after a company for violating you under the FDCPA, you cannot define them as anything other than what the law defines them as. So when you refer to the name of the company that's coming after you, you have to give them the label of the debt collector because Congress is telling you that the debt collector is liable under the FDCPA 15 USC 1692K. So anytime you're writing a letter to a company regarding something that they're stating that you owe, if you're going under them, under the FDCPA, you have to be able to properly define them in order to properly state your claim. Because when you properly state your claim, you're defining the parties, who they are, who you are, you're defining what they were responsible to do under that subsection and what you were responsible to do under that subsection. And then you also have to describe what they failed to do. So you have to get the requirements and then explain what they failed to do. Now, one of the other things that's most important here is that even you as the consumer, you have certain responsibilities under these subsections, right? So when we look at the FDCPA, okay, and we look at the validation of debts, let's just go into this really quick, right? So there are certain requirements that the consumer has that you have to follow in order for you to be able to say that you have a legitimate claim, right? You have to be able to state your claim. So if you're stating that under the FDCPA 15 USC 1692G validation of debts, that if you as a consumer fails to notify the debt collector in writing within a 30-day period described, then you have failed to satisfy your requirements under the FDCPA for this subsection, and therefore you have no claim. Let me say that one more time. So if you're disputing a debt, Congress clearly outlines what the requirements of the consumer is. You are the consumer. Remember, you're a natural person that you may be obligated or allegedly obligated to pay a debt. And the or is very important because that means that you have a choice if you're going to pay the debt or not. So Congress is telling you, the consumer, that you have to notify the debt collector in writing within the 30-day period described. So if you fail to notify them, then you have no claim against them under the FDCPA. So this is the part that you're supposed to do as a consumer. So when we go up to the top, this section outlines what the debt collector is supposed to do. Within 5 days after the initial communication with the consumer, this is where you're putting the company on notice, right? And this is what they are supposed to do within 5 days after the initial communication with you. In connection with the collection of any debt, a debt collector shall means they have to do something, unless the following information contained in the initial communication of the consumer has paid the debt, right? So basically what they're saying is if you notify them that you want them to validate a debt under the FDCPA, the only way that they are not required to comply is if, number one, you have decided to pay the debt, right? That's the only thing that is going to keep them from having to satisfy these requirements if you have chosen to pay the debt or if you have failed to properly notify them that you requested they validate a debt. Okay, so what they're required to do. The debt collector is required to provide the consumer a written notice containing the amount of the debt, the name of the creditor to whom the debt is owed, a statement that unless the consumer within 30 days after the receipt of notice disputes the validity of the debt or any portion thereof. Right, so this is what they are required to do. Now, disputed debts. There was something else that I wanted to cover. Okay, the name of the creditor. See, let's go back to number 2. The name of the creditor to whom the debt is owed. Now, what's the definition of the creditor? The term creditor means any person who offers or extends, creating a debt to whom a debt is owed. But such debt does not include any person to the extent that he receives an assignment or transfer of debt. So who do you know receives an assignment or transfer of debt? Those are collection agencies. Debt is assigned to them. Debt is transferred to them. So you can't define a debt collection agency as a creditor because they're a debt collector. It says you cannot define them as a creditor. And so under this subsection, you're going to want to define them as a debt collector because Congress is telling you that the debt collector holds the liability under the FDCPA. I hope this is making sense. If you're watching, definitely go ahead and share this broadcast out. And I think let me go ahead and share this out now because I want to make sure that you all can get this information, okay? Let's see. Let's go ahead and share this broadcast out. Because even though it's Friday, you all can still tune in. You can still tune in. Okay. Yeah, let's take care of that, all right? All right. I think you all should be able to see and hear me now. All right, there we go. Right there. Okay, perfect. Okay, so again, you have to be able to properly define the parties under the FDCPA. Now, this is the FCRA, 15 U.S.C. 1681. We are in the civil liability for willful noncompliance. So who is liable under the FCRA? Okay, so what does it say? Any person who willfully fails to comply. Who do they define as a person? Any individual, partnership, corporation, trust, state, cooperative, so on and so forth. So previously we did discuss that a person is defined as a business, right? So the person, now this is the thing, it also says individual. So sometimes we like to define ourselves as a person, but when we're dealing with consumer law, we define ourselves as a consumer. In the eyes of the law, a person is a partnership, corporation, trust, estate, right? So in this subsection, the individual, us, because we are also an individual, even though we're we're considered to be a living, breathing person, but we're also defined as an individual under this subsection. So it says any person who willfully fails to comply. Okay, and if in any of your documentation where you're going through the administrative process and you're writing your letters, if you're defining yourself as an individual, you can potentially take on the liability of the subsection for something that you failed to do. So it's not just good enough for us to be going after these companies and trying to hold them liable for what they failed to do. Because even though we know that they're wrong, if we fail to properly state our claim, they win. And that's the tricky part. That's the tricky part of doing this, because you really have to know what hat you're wearing at what time during what situation. And if you cannot properly identify the parties, then your claim, you have no valid claim. Because if you can't properly identify the party, then how can you properly identify what they failed to do under that subsection under which to hold them liable? So just think about it. You can't go and accuse a stranger with a different name of a crime that you saw someone else commit. That's basically the same thing when you fail to properly identify the parties. I hope this is making sense, everyone. I really, really hope this is making sense. Okay, so now let's circle back to truth in lending. All right, and we're going to go into the credit transaction section of truth in lending. Oh, wait, no, this is not the one I want to go into because that one goes really deep. And we're not ready. We're not ready. Hold on one second. Credit transactions, general provisions. Okay, so this is, now truth in lending has one of the biggest criminal and civil liability sections of US code. So there's a lot of juicy things in here that you can actually go after a person for. Okay, so this one says whoever, so anyone can bear the liability of this subsection of truth in lending. 15 USC 1611. And let's see, credit billing. Now, this is another one that I wanted to go over. I wasn't going to go over it before I went over the entire truth in lending section, but this is regarding timing of payments. And this is especially important for people who have 30-day late payments reporting on their credit report. And it says right here, a creditor may not treat a payment on a credit card account under any open and consumer credit plan that's late for any purpose, unless the creditor has adopted reasonable procedures designed to ensure that each periodic payment, including the information required, is mailed or delivered to the consumer not less than 21 days before the due date, which usually never happens. But there's more to this that I can't get into right now because it'll completely confuse you. It'll definitely confuse you. All right, so the equal opportunity credit. So this is, all right. Now this is another civil liability section of the FDCPA. And so in this particular subsection, they are identifying the creditor as the liable party civilly. So remember in the last section that we were in, it defined the debt collector as the liable party. And it is describing the company as the creditor, not the debt collector. So who's the creditor? And this is the same definition, means any person who regularly extends. So like I said before, under the FDCPA, if you are defining yourself as the original creditor, then that means that you're willing to take on the liability for failure to comply with any requirement imposed under the subsection. So if you sue someone for a violation and you label yourself as the creditor, they can flip it on you and counterclaim against you for your violations under the FDCPA. So you have to be really careful how you define yourself. And the thing of the matter is, this is one of the issues that I have when I speak to different people that call themselves the original creditor for whatever reason, right? Which, like I said before, we know that we are the original creditor and we are the ones extending the credit and loaning the money that's being loaned back to us with interest. The reason why I say be very clear in defining yourself as a consumer is because as you're going through these laws, you can literally look at every single liability section of every statute under US code, and you will never, never see the word consumer defined as the liable party. You won't see it. I want somebody, if you are watching this live or you are watching the replay, I want you to try to go and find one of the statutes, and we're talking about 15 USC and even in 18 USC, right? If you're looking in Title 15 or Title 18 of the US Code, I want you to try to find me any subsection within this law that defines the consumer as the liable party. And so basically what I'm saying is that when you go and read these civil liability sections, it is telling you who's liable. It gives the name, any creditor. The other subsection said any debt collector. The other subsection said any person. None of these subsections said anything about the consumer being the liable party. And when you look at the definition of a creditor, it's not defined as a consumer. It says any person. The term consumer does not appear anywhere in this definition as the creditor. It appears nowhere in the definition. When we go back to the FDCPA, it doesn't say anything about the consumer being a liable party. So if the consumer is not the liable party in any of these subsections, then why are we paying bills? These companies are geniuses at taking the liability and pushing it back on you during normal course of business. They created this system, so they know exactly how to do that while not properly informing you of your rights. So if you look through these subsections, you can look at almost any civil liability section, and we're taking it back to, this is truth in lending. It starts at 15 USC 1602. What does person mean? Person means natural person or organization. Does it say anything about a consumer? It doesn't say anything about a consumer. Go back one. Criminal liability. See right here, it just says whoever. So you probably know how to define yourself, right? And this is what I wanted to show you all. This is why the legal language is so tricky, because you literally have to know definitions of the word to know who they're speaking about in these laws. Right? So we have to be able to properly define ourselves. So I felt that that was an important lesson, because I touched on properly defining yourself during your administrative process, but I felt the need to dive a little bit deeper into it, because it just is a reminder that we have got to begin to read. We have to begin to read. It's going to be the difference between you paying an astronomical amount of money for a product or service that you want, as opposed to you completing the transaction in the way that is most beneficial to you and not the party offering you the product or the service, right? All of these laws are designed for the consumer to win. We just have to be able to identify our place in these laws and how we identify ourselves to go after our remedy. So I hope that this information was beneficial to you. I just wanted to really just go through truth in lending. Starts at 1601, goes all the way down to, truth in lending is long too. It starts at 1601, 15 USC 1601, and goes all the way up to 1667. Also got into the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which is 15 USC 1681. So 15 USC 1681, and it goes from 1681 down to 81X. That's the FCRA. right? That's the FCRA. And then we also went into the FDCPA, which is 15 USC, wait, this one is 1692. And this one actually starts at 15 USC 1692, and then it goes all the way down to 1692P. So you can click on, every time you see a civil liability section, if Congress is describing to you who is liable under that subsection, and you are going after a company for violating you under that law, do not define yourself as the liable party in your documentation. So back to the people that are defining themselves as the original creditor. If you're defining yourself as the original creditor under truth in lending, if you're going after a company using truth in lending laws and you're defining yourself as the original creditor, you are taking on the liability of that claim. I hope that this is making sense. To everyone that defines themselves as the original creditor. And I'm hoping that a lot of you are watching this video or you come across the replay somewhere, because all of these videos are also going to be uploaded onto my YouTube channel, which is also at Tamara T. Bush. And it'll be on there as, you know, I'll create different playlists and things for you to be able to get to easily and just watch the threaded videos. But yeah, all of these videos are also going to be on YouTube, and then you'll see a little bit of me on TikTok as I just put this information together. And I'm trying to find somebody to do these cute little TikTok videos for me, but I'll bring it together. But this is very important. I know I keep coming back to this, know how to identify yourself. This is very important because it's a ton of us right now. We don't even know who we are. We don't know who we are. And we allow other people to tell us who we are. We allow other people to define us. We got to stop doing that. We have to stop doing that. Because the problem is that if you don't know who you are, how are you going to teach your child who they are? How are you going to teach your child who they are if you don't know? Please, somebody tell me this. And we have to get back to promoting reading. We have to promote reading, and people will continue to write books. People will continue to write books. People will continue to read, but we don't read the fine print in everything that we do every single day of our life, and it is hurting us. So I'm not going to be on my soapbox, but we have to know who we are. So this for me was a very important lesson on this Friday evening. Who holds the liability? So I want you all to take this information, think about it, really think in your head, who holds the liability? So when you begin to, you know, from this day forward, when you open up your mail and you can read what you're looking at from a different set of eyes, the words on those pieces of paper are going to hold a different meaning for you, because you now have new information to use and apply to your life. Right. So I'm just asking you to pay attention. Just pay attention. But I'm not going to hold you. I'm going to let you all go. But definitely, you know, leave some feedback, put some comments in there for me. I forgot to ask you to put where you were tuning in from. Put a one in the chat if you can hear me, but I believe that you can. And just watch this video and pass it on, because somebody needs to know how to exercise their consumer rights. All right, everyone. You have a great Friday. Don't party too hard. And I will see you all in the next video. Peace and blessings.